2 years in Canada. Welcome back if you are familiar with me. If you're not, I'm Common Free. I moved from South Africa to Calgary, Canada with my husband Ian and our 2 cats, and at the time I was halfway through a pregnancy. We emigrated through the express entry route, specifically the skilled worker avenue. And the reason I'm saying that is because that is the number one question we get asked about moving to Canada or Calgary is, did you move here for work? So we did not move here for work. Neither of us had employment in Canada when we moved here. That's kind of part of the avenue we went, is that you come over unemployed and then you secure employment on this side. So we did not choose Calgary for a particular job. We specifically wanted to move to Calgary. We were allowed to move to anywhere in Canada except Quebec because we don't speak French. And we went through kind of pros and cons of different places and what we thought of that and so forth. And we decided to move to Calgary. After moving over, Ian secured employment, I think, in like the second month of us having moved here. And then a few months after we moved here, Elba was born. Elba is now 19 months old. I covered most of that in our first year of moving here, but I just want to give some context. I mean, it's been a whole year if you did watch that video. Or if you're not familiar with me and you don't feel like watching the video, you just want to know what it's like 2 years into us living here. I'd like to start with an overarching feel of having been here for 2 years. And the one word I can use to describe it is ease. For a while now, a couple of weeks, maybe even like a month or so, I have experienced having a lot more energy. More than a month. But I suddenly realized that I've got more energy at the end of the day. I am doing a lot more things. I'm able to do a lot more things. I'm more creative, etc. And then when I reflected on why that might be, yes, sure, Elba is older, so it probably has a lot to do with the parenting phase that I'm in now, or maybe I'm less of a super mom now that she's a toddler. But more than that, what I realized is I think that so much adjustment has happened, and it's not that I'm adjusting every single day anymore. And it's so many things that contributes to that. Like one of the things is that we've experienced all of the seasons twice now. And with having experienced things more, it becomes easier. I have more energy because my brain is not constantly taking in new things and needing to evaluate these new experiences and all these new things. And there's so much stimulus that my brain needs to take in when everything is new constantly. Doing the everyday kind of things no longer required as much conscious thought or intention or thinking through different steps that I needed to do for a long time after we moved here. And examples of that is putting gas or petrol into our car, thinking in terms of dollars, and not so much thinking in terms of like, what does this cost in rent? And of course, yes, I still do that to some extent. But at least now, in terms of budgeting and buying things, when I go to a shop, I'm much more acquainted with things and can do a price comparison in what things cost here, not comparing to what it costs in South Africa. Also, things like driving on the right-hand side of the road. For a long time, I would still consciously tell myself, remember to drive on the right-hand side of the road, or the signages, or where I'm going. So much more familiar with specific places that we frequent. So then you know, okay, I know where to park. I know where the entrance is. You don't have to think about all these things all the time. And then another element to that is that a year ago, I had made many of the friends that I still have now. But where we are now is a much more established relationship. There's not like in the beginning of a relationship where you're constantly learning new things about each other and you're learning the context of the other person. Of course, we're still constantly learning new things about each other. But the relationship is very established. The friendship is very established. I'm very familiar with them. And even their families now. I've met their families through attending different events with them. And the conversations are not that much information that I'm constantly processing. The time that I'm spending with those people, there's very much a sense of ease around that. And that's not to say that all of those things were particularly difficult before. And that's why I'm mentioning this, because it's not like I was consciously aware that I was spending so much energy just because everything was so new all the time. Only once I had adjusted and I was no longer doing that was I like, oh, wow, I was really spending a lot of energy on a day-to-day basis on things that people who live here definitely don't do. And when I no longer needed to do that, it freed up so much of my energy. And I was suddenly doing loads of other random projects where initially most of that is just going to adjusting and learning all the new things that you're constantly learning. And you think, yeah, sure, you learn it in the first couple of months. But honestly, it took me more than a year, nearly 2 full years, to really feel this major sense of ease. Moving on to a little bit of an update. We sadly no longer have our cats with us. I did make a video on the decision to rehome them and where they went to. I will link that down below if you want to watch that. It was a very difficult decision. It was a very difficult process. It was very difficult for some time after that, but I do still believe that it has been the best decision for them and for us. Now, if you haven't watched my rehoming video or you don't know anything about that and you are experiencing a lot of judgment coming up, I completely understand. I literally never imagined that I would rehome my cats after 10 years of having them and moving to Canada with them. But yeah, we definitely miss Mila and Mufasa a lot. We talk about them a lot. We do get updates. They are loved and they are cared for. And that leads me to the next big thing about moving here. And I would probably say one of the biggest challenges for our family has been Ian's skin struggles. We don't know to what extent this may have happened if we had stayed in South Africa, but the climate here is particularly harsh for people who have skin issues. It is very dry here in Calgary. It is dry outside, but then it is also dry inside your home. The heating system essentially is literally blowing hot, dry air into your house. After moving here, it got really bad. And for the first year of us being here, he was dealing with a lot of that. And he had started a new job in a very different environment than what he was used to. So in that first year, he was prescribed cortisone cream by a dermatologist, which he used. And then in this year, for the most part of this year, he has been dealing with the side effect of having used that cortisone cream. So right now, and for many months now, Ian has been suffering with what is called TSW, and that is topical steroid withdrawal from the creams he used to try to help with the flare-ups that he had in the first year. So that's kind of my difficult updates, getting them out the way. Biggest kind of hardest challenges for our family that we've experienced in our first 2 years of moving here has been those two things. And moving from that to more positive stuff is that despite the fact that he is in pain and experiences extreme discomfort with his skin every single day, Ian has managed to work the same job that he got shortly after we moved here. And he still works full-time, albeit now he works mostly from home and doesn't really go into the office until he is more healed up. I don't like to share too much of Ian's stuff, especially not because I'm sharing on behalf of him, but these are things that I think are very relevant to the discussion of your first 2 years in a country. Is what is the impact of the climate on your physical and mental well-being? So that is a big one. And then also wanting to just discuss the adjustment of the working environment for him, because this is not something I can discuss from my own experience because I haven't worked a typical job in Canada. So just a little bit about his experience. He moved from a very small consulting company in Stellenbosch to a huge corporate company. So that's been a major adjustment. That took a lot of effort from his side, not just adjusting to the actual work that he was doing, but adjusting to the corporate culture and how things work in corporate businesses and his team and all of those things. And from what he shared, I think there's also a lot of now ease from his side in terms of the major adjustments to his position and to working in this type of environment being mostly over. That doesn't mean you don't work hard still and there aren't things that are challenging and so forth, but I think that real huge everyday adjustment stuff has for the most part passed now. And then in terms of what I'm doing or what happened with my stuff is I have a consulting business, and that's what I did full time when I was in South Africa. I'm an employment relations practitioner. So essentially South African labor law, but mostly employment conflict and the dynamics of the employment relationship, counterproductive behavior, and so forth. So when we moved here, I already knew a long time ago that I'd be making adjustments, and I started making the adjustments for passive income, working online, so forth. And then Elba was born, and I massively scaled down my business to be able to predominantly focus on caring for her and work as much or as little as I could do given this major new phase of my life. And I guess that's been a big thing for me. I've heard people ask me, like, what's going on in your life, or how's things with motherhood or work? And I often have a very similar answer of, I'm figuring out how to parent in the way that we want to parent while seeing how much or how little work can I do. It's been over time different. Like at different points, I could do more or less. At times I took on specific types of things and then I had to be like, nope, I actually can't do that. Or there have been times with our family or parenting where I needed to push my resources more into being here. So what I will say with that is I think I was a little bit naive in terms of what I thought I would be able to get done while parenting the way that we want to parent. And I say while parenting the way we want to parent is we know and have known for a really long time that we do not want to put our children into a daycare. We want our children, especially when they're young, to be around me, their primary parent. And there's also other elements of our parenting. If you watch any of my parenting YouTube videos, you'll know what I'm talking about. That is very hands-on or very intentional and requires a very, I don't know how else to put it, but like a hands-on approach, or maybe some reading up from my part and a lot of intentional decision-making around certain things. So the relevance for this video and what I'd like to speak about here is things around doing that while living here relative to what we kind of picture things would be like in South Africa, particular challenges or the easy things that forms part of that context of my life. Let's talk about that, and probably one of the biggest things if we're talking about Canada versus South Africa, and that is here we have no domestic support. We do not have somebody who cleans our house. We're in South Africa, even before we were parents, we had someone come in for a full day twice a week. Now, once we became a parent, we probably would have increased that to more times in a week to have somebody help us do things around the house, even probably help us with some cooking. By the way, we are still in contact with our domestic worker from South Africa. It's really nice. With the whole cleaning your own house, that's probably one of the things that I was naive about, because I didn't necessarily think how much time it takes to do household stuff that I didn't do in South Africa. So I could focus on work because I wasn't focusing on cleaning my house other than like a surface tidying up and decluttering here and there. I never did any of the deep cleaning. I barely did any of the laundry. Packed the dishwasher and somebody else unpacked it. I never vacuumed unless I dropped something in that moment that needed to be vacuumed up. And then when moving here, we needed to experiment and figure out what works for our family in terms of cleaning and not spending an excessive amount of my time simply cleaning. And I think we've done a really good job with that, to be honest. I feel like keeping our house clean does not take a huge chunk of my day. Doing house type stuff, yeah, I'm definitely in my kind of homemaker era of my life, but I don't find that it takes excessively long. And I think that's because we figured out what works for us. And we've changed between me and Ian, like who does different things at different points. And more we're just figuring out what works for our family. So the number one thing I can say that makes a huge difference is the fact that we have a robot vacuum downstairs and we have a robot vacuum upstairs. We do not spend our time vacuuming. At the end of the day, we pick up everything, we put it up, and in the morning, the downstairs vacuum is going to go, and it's great. You can literally see it. It's little rows on the rug. So you come down and feel like it's nice and clean every single morning. And then when I'm down here making breakfast is when the upstairs one will go through our room and clean everything upstairs. Bye-bye. Then also with things like laundry, I have like a routine and a rhythm to when I'm doing it. So even through cloth diapering, full-time cloth diapering, we have done laundry and adjusted to doing those things ourselves. Another thing in our relationship dynamic is that Ian used to always do all the cooking. And then he, of course, works full-time. And Elba started eating, and I cared more about what our 3 meals a day looks like. And from there, I kind of took over the cooking duties. That was an adjustment for me. As a family, we prioritize healthy eating. That means we ideally like to make most of our food from scratch. We don't really buy convenience food. We don't buy like pre-made food or like quick and easy things. For the health benefits of our family, making a lot of food from home. Now, the reason I mention that specifically in our adjustment here in Canada is because in South Africa, I'm not sure I would have done so many of these homemaker type things that I now do living in Canada. Obviously, I'm just like speaking theoretically, but from having lived in South Africa, we had access to foods that we wouldn't make from scratch that we felt were healthy and good quality, like free range, MSG free biltong was very accessible for us. A very pure, like farm proper yogurt we would buy from the butchery that was very close to us, where we'd go pick up our milk weekly. And at this same butchery, they would often have like an Oregon blend Vosges that we would buy. And very close to us was like a artisanal, very healthy, great sourdough bread from Schoen. Now, these are the things that I'm sure are accessible here in Canada, but sometimes, I'm not going to go down the list of them, sometimes it's not as easy to find them in the pure form that we would like to find them in, so therefore make it ourselves. Or if we do find it, we find that it's cheaper if we source the raw ingredients and make it ourselves. So there's been a lot of things in terms of food that I have learned to make from scratch here, because it's either not easy for me to get it, or I didn't like the ingredients if I were to get it, or it's just cheaper and better for me to make it at home. I'm kind of jumping around topics, but they're going to come together. I'm going to jump to the topic of community. When it comes to friendships and people in my life, I value quality over quantity. And that is because I am a homebody. I'm a homebody who really likes the company of my husband and my now kid. And I have 5 million hobbies, and I really like to read and do a lot of things that I'm very happy spending most of my time just with my little family and by myself. That being said, I really, really value community and having people around you that feel like community, that feel like your village of people. These are people that I resonate with them. These are people that I'm excited to spend time with and that are excited to spend time with me. These are people where you have some shared values, where you grow and you learn from them. These are friendships or just relationships. We don't have to be friends to be part of my community that are life enriching simply by spending time together. It's also people that you typically like doing similar types of activities. And one of the wonderful things for me here is that I feel like that has happened for me and for our family organically. Elba has a wooden vacuum and she's vacuuming the rug. I feel what happened here was I sort of put myself out there a little bit, but then I just kind of attracted people who resonate with the things that I do or my approach to life and want to spend time with me. And of course, there were times where, I put myself out there going, hey, we have this and this in common. Hey, do you maybe want to hang out or get together or do something? So of course there is that element of also putting yourself out there, but I will say I really like the friends that I've made here. And I do have this real sense of community. So let me give you a few examples of that. So the first one is that we recently bought a cow with friends. Not a live cow. We went halvies on a cow. And it was great to do it with him because this was something we wanted to do, but in the first year, it just felt like it's just too much pressure, a lot of money to put into that. And we just felt like we didn't know enough and we weren't secure enough and etc. So this year, we were like, no, we're going to do that now because we like to eat beef on a regular basis and it's expensive to buy it the whole time. So as with everything, I'm doing my research and looking things up, and we have these friends who've been buying a quarter cow every year, and it was awesome. So they've also had a son, so now they wanted to up it to half a cow, or did because we wanted half a cow, and it was great to go with them because they had their butcher who they've been buying from for a few years. It was also easier because we're not so familiar with the words of the cuts And even if we were familiar with the words of the cuts, like in South Africa, we never bought half a cow. So we've never had to be like, oh, these are the kind of cuts that I want. So it's great because they did that. And then we just looked at what they wanted for their half, and we didn't make any changes. We were happy with it and duplicated that for our half. And there was a lot of arrangements that were a lot easier because we did it with friends. And it's not just about the ease thing. So there we saved a lot of money by going full cow with friends, because you obviously get a discount if you go full cow. And also there's loads of discussions and sharing of recipes and things that we're making with the cow and doing those things together, and discussions of things that we don't know much about, like smoking meat. So, but they do. And it's been really great to learn from them and go through this experience. And it gives a real sense of community, buying a cow with friends. Anyway, so for buying this half a cow, other thing that I did this year that I did not do in our first year is that I literally yesterday made biltong for the first time since I was a child. And I don't think that it counts when I was a child because I simply helped my parents make it. I wasn't really involved in the process much, but I have been bombarding my parents and my family with loads of questions, and Ian built me a structure for hanging the biltong, and I'm very excited. So we'll see how that turns out. But that also feels really nice because it's this sense of community with our Canadian friends here, buy the cow and then make something super South African out of some of the cuts that we got. Still on the community front, there's other things like my sourdough starter was from a friend nearby. I have what are they called? Yogurt cultures, which I'm also now making yogurt, which was from a friend. The other day, I went to go feed friends' cats when they were away. These are the little things that make you feel like you've got your sense of community. I know that it might sound like small things, but there are just some things that for me make it feel like you've got more of a community. Like literally with this biltong structure, two of the pieces we didn't cut at Home Depot and wanted to have them cut. We've got friends that live 3 minutes from us. They came over with their handsaw, cut the pieces for us, are invested emotionally, I guess, into this process of our biltong making. Super excited as well. But yeah, I feel like we have a nice community of people around us. And I feel really proud of that because I find that it is very important as my role as a mother for Alba to establish a wonderful community of people that she will grow up being around. I feel really good about our community so far. And on that note, now is the first time I've got this inkling that I haven't had probably a year or so, where I decided, I think I want to expand my community or my friendship circle a little bit more and maybe put myself out there to establish more relationships. Now I realize why I'm having that inkling now is we are in October. So fall is in full swing. It is so beautiful. The colors are so rich. But with fall coming, I'm very aware that I am still very South African in that I find it difficult to go out when the weather is difficult weather. I find that when it is cold, when it is snowing, when it is windy, when it is raining, I can very easily stay at home. And I don't want that for Alba here because the winters are long and it's important for her and for my well-being that we get out even if the weather is difficult. And it is difficult for me because, yes, I've done how many winters now? This will be our third winter. It is still difficult for me to know what gear and how to dress and do all of those things. Yes, learned a lot, but it's not as second nature as people who have lived here. Now, this inkling I got to expand my friendship circle is truly to have more people to get out the house with and do things with during the very long winter. I believe that having some company with that will make it easier for me to make sure that we don't spend too much time indoors. Now, moving on from the kind of emotional, social community aspect to our physical community. This is, I guess, a little bit of an update, sort of. When we first moved here, we lived in an Airbnb for 8 weeks in kind of central northwest Calgary. I really like that location. Very old houses, very expensive though. And the old houses sometimes comes with its own stuff. The first house we moved into was very north of Northwest. And then we lived there for a year, and it served us well while we lived there. I've made other videos about that house and a tour and why we moved and so forth. But then since then, we have moved and we live in a different neighborhood now, still in the Northwest, but less north and more west. And I absolutely love this neighborhood. I have really, really, really enjoyed living here. It is on the older side. It's like a more established community. But the biggest thing for me, and I covered this in the house tour of the house we currently live in, is there are trees everywhere. Everywhere I look are trees. And I didn't realize how important that was to me until I didn't have as many trees in our previous neighborhood, because it's a less established neighborhood. In Calgary, it's prairies, so it doesn't have that many trees by itself here. But this neighborhood, I love that the houses do not all look exactly the same. The houses look very different. The houses next to each other. The people, you can see many of them have lived here for 30 years or more. They all know each other. And it's got a very homey feel to it. I love the parks around here. I love taking Elba out. I love walking around our neighborhood. So yes, because it is on the older side, and I guess the houses are fairly large, our neighbors are all a lot older than we are. They literally all have grandkids that are Elba's age or older. So in that sense, it's not like we're surrounded by young families, but there are more than enough young families in this community that we interact with. And because of where we're located, a lot of the communities around us have young families with children of the same age. To kind of end off this discussion of community, though, is just bring it back to this whole house buying topic. And the reason I'm talking about it in this video, and also spoke about it in other videos, is because I think it's a topic that features if you're, I don't know, in your 30s, maybe in your 40s, if you have a kid. Like, it's like the big question, like, oh, you're going to buy a house. You should buy a house. You should buy a house over here. Da, 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 da. And maybe it's like that in all countries. Maybe it's like a thing in Canada. People really want to buy a house, and that's like a major point of discussion. So I'm mentioning it in here. We don't know if we want to buy a house. We do still feel like we're kind of exploring Calgary, but now more so, I know more. Okay, if we were to buy a house, which are the communities that I would want us to live in? So I feel like I'm still learning in that regard, and the community where we want to live in, or the community we currently live in, there's a big difference between what you would be paying a mortgage versus what we pay in rent. So right now, it makes sense for us to rent to live in this wonderful community where we are so happy to live here. And we are currently busy extending our lease. So we'll definitely be renting for more than a year because we would like some stability for our family. After a lot of not stability the last while and a lot of changes happening. And that brings me into my next topic of discussion, which is money. If talking about money is weird for you, can skip ahead using the time codes down below. I don't find it weird talking about it at all. And I think it is such an important thing to talk about in videos like this because it's such an important consideration. When you're moving to a new country, something we discuss with people is, let's say you're leaving South Africa. You want to leave for a better quality of life than the one that you have there, right? And whatever that might mean for your family, like what you prioritize or what is important to you. And then the question becomes, can you afford to live the life that you want to live if you move to a different country? And it might be something small, like not having domestic support. Is that something that you would spend your money on if you moved here? Getting somebody else to clean your house, because for you, quality of life is not spending time cleaning. So in that discussion, we are a predominantly single income household at the moment. Yes, I still have my business. Yes, I still work, but the amount of money that I bring in relative to when I was working full-time is significantly different and very inconsistent with the choices that we've made. So it doesn't make a major contribution at this point to our family's financial situation. And most of what I make gets reinvested back into other things. Now, this is a choice we made, is we wanted me to be home raising our kid in a way that is important to us. With that decision comes that you forego other things that of course would have been more possible had I gone into full-time employment. I think the biggest impact is if we were a dual income household, household, we would have been able to rebuild the savings that we spent moving here a lot faster than we have been able to do on a mostly single income. Then there's other choices that are more important to us, so it looks kind of different when it comes to things. So for example, I said, I don't know if we want to buy a house, but what I do know is if we do want to buy a house, we'd want to buy a house in the neighborhood we currently live in, or maybe one of the ones next to us. We did for a year live on the more outskirts or the more newer neighborhoods, and I didn't like that. Of course, those houses are typically less expensive than the houses in the neighborhood we currently live in. So this is another choice of what is important to you. Is it super important to own a house and you don't mind if your commute is quite far, or if the sort of establishment of the community and things like that? Where for me, initially I thought it didn't matter, but then having lived in a sort of newer community, that was a further commute for Ian to work and to specific things that I like to go do with Alba. I really didn't enjoy it. That is a major factor for us, is we'd rather live in a slightly more expensive neighborhood. It made such a material difference to our lives in terms of literally like the trees and the things that we see around us, but also the ease of access to different things based off of where we live. And also, of course, community around you. So one of the big reasons that people may not want to leave South Africa is because it's a lot more doable in the kind of income class we were in South Africa, to buy a nice size home for you and your family in the neighborhood where you want to live, relative to how that would be for us here if you'd had to look at the prices of houses in Canada at the moment. But for us, we're okay to rent at this point. And then I'm bringing that back to, what is the type of life that you and your family want to live, and can you have that in a country that you move to? We don't want Alba to go to daycare. We want me to be home with her. And I'm very happy to say that we've been able to do that and live what we wanted for our family, having moved to Canada. Now, of course, we don't live some flush luxury type life on a single income, but we've been able to do the things that were important to us. And we are now, 2 years in, a lot more stable than we were a year ago. But even with that stability, of course, you always want to have a bigger safety net and all of those things. So we're still building up towards that. We're still very mindful of how we're spending and income and all of those things, which are ongoing things throughout life. And you go through different phases of your life. So I find it very difficult to talk about this topic, because I find it's really polarized. You know, if you say, oh, this is difficult, or we're not doing that right now, people are like, oh, yeah, they're struggling, it's so hard and whatever. Or if I say, you know, yes, we're quite stable with this, or this is going well, then people are like, ooh, whoa, like, like a brag much. So please don't take us either end of those two extremes. And I'm speaking as someone somewhere in the middle of that. And I do believe it's a topic that is great to talk about. How are you spending money? How are you saving money? Are you doing the things you want to with your money? Like, these are really great topics to explore. I'm not going to explore it any further in this video, but if you're listening to what I'm saying, I'm trying to capture that complexity. Maybe I'm not doing a great job of it, in the hopes that it is helpful for people who are either going through it themselves and can relate to some of it, or are thinking about moving and having those questions in their mind. Like, what is the life? Becoming like harder and harder to film this stuff. But anyway, like jumping back to the topic now of still having expenses that we don't foresee. So one of them is, when you're a parent, there are going to be some expenses that you just don't realize you want to have. A big one is Alba obviously grows really quickly. So buying her winter gear every year, for us, you know, we're not growing. So whatever we get, we can just have that one thing and keep it. But the previous winter, I bought some winter stuff and then realized, oh, I don't really like this. It doesn't work. It's too bulky. Like, it's quite uncomfortable to put onto her. And now I found what I like for winter for her. But last year she couldn't walk. And then this year she can walk. So it was a whole thing for me as a family who prioritizes wide toe box, 0 drop, barefoot shoes. I spent a great deal of time deciding what winter shoes do I want to get for Alba. These are still things that we experience as new parents and being new to Canada. So this year, I really hope they turn out great. We paid a deposit to have like a type of native shoe made for me and for Alba. So we're having all natural muklaks made, specifically having them made so that the toe box can be widened to our specifications. So someone here in Calgary is making them and currently waiting on that. So I really hope that they turn out great. But that's an example of something that we spent I'd say quite a large amount of money on as something to make winter a more pleasant experience for me and for her, and not to compromise the types of shoes we wear. Because previously I just wore normal snow boots and I don't like doing that. But it's also other things like buying half a cow. We bought a chest freezer when we did the first 40 days. But of course, for half a cow, you need a really big chest freezer. So we bought another chest freezer. And then this room I'm currently sitting in is Elba's playroom. When we felt we were in a position to do it, we purchased some new furniture items for it to have it be kind of more neat and organized and work well for us. We still haven't bought like super fancy winter coats. The first winter we were here, we bought those like $100 ones from Marks. We still wear them. And I like it. I like that coat. So I don't think that that's on my list of things to do this winter, but it's probably on my list of things to do in some winter. But on that discussion, like, there are certain wool things that I really want for my family. So again, my whole homemaker error is that I've recently learned from YouTube how to crochet. And then I buy thrifted yarn or secondhand yarn of particular natural fibers that I want to use. And I'm now making the things for my family. That would be a lot more expensive if I were to just buy the item or even buy the wool new. Right, so that's kind of on the money front and the spending front and the buying things front. Moving on to another very common topic of discussion is missing South Africa. Have you guys been back to South Africa? Do you get lots of family that visit, etc., etc.? Yes, obviously we miss our family, but I will say that having access to video calls and video calls being such a common thing has helped a lot. We very regularly speak to our family, like more than once a week. We have video calls with different family members. So I feel very connected to them. I feel very much like I know what's going on in their lives. But it isn't the same, of course, as if you were there with them. And it is very sad for me that I have a nephew who I haven't met. And my niece has grown up so much in the time that we've been here. So we have not been back to South Africa since we moved here for a variety of reasons. The first year, it was far, it was expensive, and we just had a baby. And this year we will sadly also not be going. But again, it is far and it is expensive. And right now, a lot of our family resources needs to go towards, and that I mean time, money, etc., needs to go towards Ian's healing journey. And I just don't think that a trip to South Africa right now would be something that is restorative for him, especially not traveling with a toddler across different time zones and then having to come back and adjusting to that. I think that will put pressure on our family right now that would not be good for us. For the same reason that we've not gone back to South Africa, we've not had loads of family come visit us. It is far, it is expensive, and it is across time zones. So it's not an easy travel, but we are fortunate in that my mom has come to visit us several times and she will be here next month. I'm super excited. I think this is the longest she hasn't visited us since like the first time when we moved here. So I'm really, really excited that she will be coming. And then I want to answer kind of something that comes up a lot is where people discuss like, how can you raise a kid so far away from family? And I need to be like next to my parents. My parents help me or my siblings help me. And this is maybe something that's different for us versus a different family. But even if we were in South Africa, I don't think that would have been such a big feature of our lives. Like where we were living in South Africa, yes, my sister was about 40 minutes drive from us, but my dad lives in rural Eastern Cape on a farm and my mom lives in Spain. So they were not going to be close by to help us with a lot of things. And even if, for example, like my sister who is close by, my sister's got her own children and a dog and a house and lots of things to do. So I definitely don't romanticize that if we were to live in South Africa, I would have much more help with Alba. And we never had a child with the expectation of other people needing to help us. Of course, I do think that having a village and having support is absolutely vital. I'm more talking about the realistic thing of the modern society we live in. That was not something that I thought was realistic for us to picture in our parenting journey. So that all being said, I am super excited for my mom to come visit. I absolutely look forward to it every time. Like whenever she talks to me about how long she's gonna stay, I'm like, you stay as long as you want. Like you move in with us if you want to. I don't think she wants to. And I don't say that because I'm like desperately needing help with Alba and it's such a break for me when my mom comes. It's not. This is our norm. Like I parent Alba and we do this stuff. When my mom comes, it is just so wonderful to experience your kid with your family. That's the thing I miss. I can't even miss it because I never had it because Alba was born here. But I wish that my family could just spend time with her because I'm like, it's so amazing to spend time with her. I want that with them and I want that experience with them. And I really want her to know them. So right now we do the best we can with some video calls. But I really love when my mom comes to visit, just doing the things here with her and experiencing Alba with her is very life enriching for me. So to answer the question of can you parent being so far away from your parents or your siblings? And I just want to say we do. And we parent intentionally and consciously and then and no screens and no active toys and all of those things just fine, with it being just the two of us here with Alba and with Ian working full time and with Ian needing to spend a lot of his resources on healing. It's not necessarily always easy, but it's so meaningful and it's so wonderful. But I still look forward a lot to my mom coming to visit, or if anybody else from our family has any plans to come visit us. And it's really great. I want to end this video with a kind of reflection, discussion / some future plans that we have based off of our experience of living here. A big thing when you tell people you live in Canada is like, oh, it's so cold, the winters are so rough, I'd never be able to do the winters, etc. The first winter we were here was new, it was novel, I was pregnant, then had a baby. It was really easy to stay inside and to experience winter. Then we went into summer, and because of lack of experience, I didn't make the most of summer the way that I really think is necessary to do when it's not as long as you're used to. So last winter was particularly difficult, and not like superly difficult, but looking back and reflecting on it, I recognize that it is something that I believe we need to be intentional about in order to maintain our health and our well-being through the very, very long winter. It was difficult for a number of reasons. Alba was crawling, but not walking yet. And that is very difficult to go out because she was old enough that she didn't want to just be in the carrier in the stroller, but she couldn't yet walk. So it was very limited in terms of spending time outside where she could walk. So I do suspect that would be easier. Yeah. I didn't make the most of summer and spring. So I didn't really build up a 10 since I never had to put effort into that stuff. It just naturally happened. So by the end of last winter, I was as see-through as it gets and just not feeling all that healthy and fresh of many, many months of cold and indoors and so forth. I learned my lesson with that. And this year, literally, as soon as the app said that there was some amount of proper UV in the sunlight that we're getting, because Calgary is very sunny. There's loads of sun all the time, but doesn't mean that you're actually getting any vitamin D from the sun. So as soon as the UV indicated we finally can get some vitamin D from the sun, I started spending time outside with Alba and getting as much sun as possible to build up the base tan to kind of recover from not having gotten that sun throughout the winter. And I was very strategic about it because of the lack of vitamin D across the year. I didn't use any sunscreen on either of us, but I instead spent the time in the mornings and the afternoon building up a base tan, literally on an app, keeping track of how much time we were spending in the sun and all of that. And also very much used summer and spring. Did a lot of things, got out a lot, still getting out, even though it is fall and it is a little bit colder already. It's not as cold as winter. So I actually had a laugh with a friend where she noted that I was being very Canadian about my approach to summer and spring of really getting out and really doing things. And every plan you make with someone, just spending as much time as possible outside during these months. And it's so interesting because I've never been one who lived very seasonally. And here, I think for your health and well-being, it does you a great deal of good to live seasonally. So the summer and springtime is very busy. It's a lot of activities with your kid. It's a lot of doing things. And sometimes there's even a bit like, oh, I kind of look forward to winter when there's not that much pressure to be wanting to make the most of this good weather. Like every day was a good day. I was like, we got to get outside. And there's beauty in that because then you also look forward to the next season and you're also kind of ready for it and you're not constantly wanting to live in just one season. So I've really developed a great appreciation for living seasonally. But of course, not being from here, there's still a lot that I have to learn in terms of how to do that. And this last year, I think I've done a major improvement relative to the previous ones, but it is still a challenge for me to get out when the weather is difficult. So as you heard earlier in the video, I am doing things and I've signed up for things that will help with that. So specifically, I signed up like me and Elba for like a nature group thing that is literally geared towards we get out in all weather, except I think when it's like minus 15 degrees Celsius, then they won't be hosting it. But stuff like that will really help me to unlearn the South African habit where I just get to wait out difficult weather because there's going to be so much good weather that I don't need to be going out and about when it's rainy and cold and windy or whatever. And then on that note of surviving winter, I think it's definitely doable. And I can make a video on things that makes it better and lessons I've learned more so than what I'm covering in this video. But what I realized last winter and when we came out of it, we are not acclimatized for this. And we also do not spend enough time outside throughout the year, I think, to go through winter and have it not knock you in terms of your health and well-being to some degree. So no, it's not just like suffering through it and terrible and any of that, but I just recognize as a family who's very health conscious and very conscious of our well-being, I don't think it is a good idea for us to do an entire winter again. Not until we've definitely learned to spend a lot more time outside and live a lot more seasonally in terms of other areas of taking care of your health. But for now, I do think it is important that we prioritize breaking up the winter to get some proper sun and some sea, because that's what Ian and I know. We've always lived and grown up by the coast. That's very important to us. So for the first time since moving here, we have planned a trip out of the country. Specifically, we are planning a trip next month-ish to Costa Rica to get some sun and to get some sea as a little bit of a way to break up the very long winter of being indoor and not swimming in the sea and seeing as much sun. I do not think that this is a necessity. This is more of a thing that I'm doing because I think that this is just really good for Ian's skin and for me and for Elba, even if it is just for like a week and a little bit. Also, that's a very common thing that people do here. Mostly, I would say they go to Mexico. Like most people we speak to quickly pop over to Mexico. I was deciding between Mexico and Costa Rica, and for some reason, picked Costa Rica. That is what we will be doing shortly and this year. You can check back in my other videos or next year update-wise how this winter has gone given the changes that I'm making. But yeah, that brings us to the end of today's video. 2 years in Calgary, Canada. It has been wonderful. We like it here. I didn't discuss it much in this video, but the biggest thing for me on a daily basis is that early mornings, evenings, you name it, I can go walk outside, just me and Alba around our neighborhood and feel safe and just focus on her and the task we're doing and not being so worried about safety stuff other than, of course, she's a toddler, tripping, cars, you know, the usual things that you want to be looking out for. And that to me was, you know, one of the big reasons why we moved here and what I wanted. And I have that. And I'm very, very happy that I have that. And I'm so happy that we are able to live the life that we want to live. And it is really tough that Ian is struggling with his skin, and we're doing as much as we can to find meaning in that very difficult experience and doing things around here to mitigate that. But yeah, that is still an ongoing challenge for our family. But all around, I really love where we live. I love our community. I am grateful for the friends that we've made and the relationships, and I really enjoy living here so far. So I'd say at the end of 2 years, all around good, with a couple of challenges in between, which is to be expected and part of life. So if you watched this whole video, thank you so much for joining me. If you liked it, please remember to like it. If you like my content, please remember to subscribe to my channel. And I will be making more videos discussing various elements that I kind of touched on in this video, but maybe in a little bit more detail. Thanks so much for joining us on this journey, especially if you've been here since right at the beginning when we first started our move. I appreciate you journeying with us.